A wall of holographic displays flickered in the dimly lit command center of Fort Independence, deep in the contested Orion expanse. Streams of data scrolled past the eyes of Captain Travis Cole, a man who had seen enough battle to know when the enemy was laughing at him. And right now, the Velker Dominion, a race of smug, reptilian overlords who controlled half the known galaxy, was doing just that. The transmission was broadcast across all human channels. A Velker admiral, clad in ornate battle-plated robes, leaned forward, his reptilian maw curled in what could only be described as condescension. Underscore primitive Earth weapons. How utterly quaint. Underscore. Beside Cole, Colonel Mark Jensen, the base's chief military engineer, exhaled sharply. The Velker were demonstrating their latest disintegration arrays, effortlessly vaporizing an asteroid with a single shot from their orbital fleet. Their message was clear. Humanity's technology was obsolete. Underscore. Your species clings to projectiles, slug throwers, as if you have learned nothing from the evolution of war. Lasers, plasma, energy, all the true weapons of an advanced race. And yet you wield what? Kinetic toys? Clubs? Clubs that scream. Underscore. A chuckle rippled through the Velker officers behind the Admiral, the sound buzzing through the transmission like static laced with arrogance. Cole clenched his jaw. They talk a lot for a species that still bleeds. Jensen cracked a wry smile, but said nothing. The officers around them, hardened men who had fought in the decade-long skirmishes leading up to this moment, remained still, watching, waiting. The Velker admiral continued, his scaled hand spreading wide in false magnanimity. Underscore, we will allow you one final choice. Surrender now, and you may live as servants under our rule. Resist, and we will wipe you from the cosmos. Underscore. The transmission ended. Silence lingered in the room, like a thick fog. General Thomas Briggs, standing at the center of the command deck, turned to his men. They think they've already won. His voice was gravelly, worn by years of warfare. And maybe they have, if we fight them the way they expect. Jensen crossed his arms. They have quantum shielding, molecular armor, and auto-aim plasma cannons that react before we can even pull a trigger. Their systems are designed to counter everything modern warfare has evolved into. Cole nodded. So maybe modern warfare isn't the answer. Briggs turned to the room. Ideas. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, Sergeant Mike Reynolds, a Marine sniper with more confirmed kills than anyone else present, leaned forward and placed something on the table with a solid thud. 8.50 BMG sniper rifle. The room stiffened. It was an old weapon, an antique by most standards. Even Earth's own forces had largely phased out slug-based arms in favor of energy weapons. But Reynolds wasn't smiling. He wasn't making a joke. Jensen frowned. You're not seriously suggesting. Reynolds cut him off. 2 days ago, during that Velker skirmish at Outpost Epsilon, my energy rifle barely scratched their foot soldiers. Shields deflected every shot. We lost the entire squad. But when my battery ran dry, I pulled this out of storage. 1 round. 1 clean shot. He tapped the rifle, punched through their armor like it was paper. 1 shot, 1 kill. Jensen hesitated. That shouldn't be possible. Their shields are built to disperse energy, Reynolds said, not raw physical force. A quiet realization spread across the room. Every battle against the Velker had been fought using high-tech weapons designed to exploit energy fields. But the Velker had optimized their defenses to counter those very attacks. They had never once considered the possibility that humans might resort to something simpler. Cole turned to Jensen. If that's true, how do we scale it? Jensen exhaled, rubbing his chin. If their shields struggle with pure kinetic impact, then we need to think bigger. Forget plasma. Forget lasers. We go back to fundamentals. His eyes gleamed with an idea. "Sir, I think I need to revisit an old project." Briggs studied him. "How old?" Jensen grinned. "World War I old." An alert blared through the command center. The Velker had begun deploying their first wave, a precursor strike force meant to test Earth's defenses. It was a mere 6 ships, a warning more than an attack. If the humans failed to hold the line, the full Velker armada would arrive within days. Briggs turned to Cole. "Get a strike team together. I want confirmation on Reynolds' theory. If kinetic weapons work, we need proof before we start rearming our entire fleet." Cole nodded, already forming a list in his head. Reynolds would be there, obviously. So would Lieutenant Jake Foster, a demolitions expert who had a knack for turning the simplest materials into devastating weapons. Corporal Ryan Nash, an ex-marksman from the Army Rangers, was another easy pick. They needed precision for this mission. One mistake, and they'd be the ones buried in space debris. Jensen stepped forward. "We need to lure them in and get a clear shot. I suggest we target one of their mid-range warships, not a fighter." Reynolds pulled back the bolt on his rifle, chambering a single round. "Then let's see if a primitive gun can make a god bleed." The mission was approved within the hour. A strike team of 5 boarded a stealth vessel, a modified Blackbird-class corvette designed for infiltration and recon. Their objective was simple: land on a drifting asteroid near the Velker formation, wait for a ship to pass, and put a slug straight through its hull. As the corvette slipped into the void, the Velker fleet loomed ahead, an unstoppable force, a species that had conquered countless worlds with overwhelming technological superiority. They had no idea that, buried in the bedrock of humanity's long, brutal history, was a simple truth. A bullet never cares how advanced you think you are. The asteroid tumbled slowly through the vacuum, its surface a jagged expanse of ancient rock and metal deposits. Perched along its uneven terrain, 5 men lay prone, their suits camouflaged against the dark void. Beyond them, the Velker warship Zewythar glided through space, its hull gleaming under distant starlight. It was a mid-range cruiser, one of the many that patrolled the sector, a perfect target for what they needed to prove. Captain Travis Cole adjusted his helmet's optics, tracking the vessel's movement. "She's holding steady. Range 5 clicks. We won't get a cleaner shot than this." Sergeant Mike Reynolds lay beside him, his .50 BMG sniper rifle set against the rock. Even in the microgravity, he moved with practiced ease, adjusting for variables only a lifetime of marksmanship could account for. Wind resistance is 0. Gravity pull is minimal. Just me, the bullet, and physics. He exhaled, aligning his crosshairs. "Let's see if their gods can catch this one." Lieutenant Jake Foster, monitoring from a small terminal embedded in the asteroid surface, gave a low whistle. "Their sensors still aren't picking us up. Looks like they're blind to mass-based weapons. They're scanning for energy signatures only." Cole's expression was grim. That level of overconfidence was damning. The Velker had tailored their defenses so precisely to modern energy warfare that they had entirely dismissed the threat of pure kinetics. "All right," Reynolds murmured, finger resting lightly on the trigger. "Sending one home." He squeezed. The rifle barked, silent in the void, but its force reverberated through the rock beneath them. The bullet, a tungsten carbide round designed to punch through armored vehicles, tore across space at over 2,800 feet per second. No energy to track. No heat signature. Just raw momentum, closing the distance in seconds. The impact was instantaneous. A section of the Zewythar's hull, previously undisturbed by the endless barrage of humanity's energy weapons, suddenly caved inward. The bullet penetrated the outer armor, breaching internal compartments with devastating precision. A second later, a violent decompression explosion ripped through the ship's side as oxygen, crew, and shattered bulkheads were expelled into the void. The ship lurched, its engines flaring wildly as emergency systems scrambled to compensate. It hadn't even registered the attack as a weapon strike. The ship's AI had no data on projectile-based impacts at this scale. The Vulkar weren't just blind to the attack. They didn't even understand what had just happened. Cole smirked. Well, I'll be damned. Reynolds was already chambering another round. Guess we just rewrote the rules. Back on Fort Independence, Colonel Mark Jensen and Dr. Ethan Hayes analyzed the telemetry data from the mission. The results were undeniable. The Vulkar shields, designed to dissipate and refract energy-based attacks, were useless against pure kinetic force. Their shield harmonics dispersed plasma, lasers, even particle beams. But a high-speed projectile? It passed straight through, slamming into its target unchallenged. Jensen leaned over the display, his fingers tapping against the console. We've been overthinking warfare for decades. We kept trying to match them in energy combat, but their defenses are built for that fight. This, he pointed to the impact data. They never saw this coming. Dr. Hayes, pacing behind him, nodded. The beauty is in the simplicity. The more advanced a species gets, the more they try to refine warfare into something clean, efficient, precise. He gestured to the fractured hull of the Zythar on the monitor. They forgot that brute force, *** mass times acceleration *** doesn't give a damn about precision. General Thomas Briggs entered the lab, his gaze sweeping across the data. He had already seen the mission feed, but now he needed to know what came next. Gentlemen, what do we have? Jensen turned. Sir, we have a game-changer. Their shields are optimized for modern warfare, but kinetic rounds go straight through. We need to scale this up. Bigger guns, faster rounds, heavier payloads. Briggs folded his arms. How fast? Dr. Hayes pulled up an old design schematic. The Mac cannon. Magnetic acceleration using coils instead of combustion. We abandoned the program when energy weapons became dominant, but if we bring it back with the right modifications, he trailed off, his mind already racing through possibilities. Briggs studied the schematic. The Mac cannon had been humanity's first step toward replacing traditional ballistics. Powerful, yes, but energy-based weapons had made them obsolete. Until now. Can we get one operational? Jensen nodded. If we retrofit one of our destroyers, we can have a working prototype in 72 hours. Briggs turned toward the viewport, gazing at the stars beyond. The Vulkar Armada was coming. A full-scale invasion was imminent. They had laughed at human weapons, certain that they had already won. That was about to change. 3 days later, inside the cavernous engineering bay of the U.S. Valiant, Jensen and his team stood before the first operational Mac cannon humanity had fielded in nearly a century. The weapon, sleek and lethal, stretched across the length of the destroyer's deck, capable of accelerating a depleted uranium slug to speeds that would make a railgun look like a slingshot. As the final systems came online, Jensen turned to Briggs. Sir, if this works, we won't just win this battle. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. We'll change warfare forever. Briggs nodded once. Then let's make history. The U.S. Valiant hung in the void, a lone predator waiting in the darkness. Every system was running cold, its reactor output minimized to avoid detection. In the distance, the Vulkar Armada surged forward, a tidal wave of warships, each one bristling with plasma cannons and disintegration arrays, each one moving with the certainty of an enemy that had never known true resistance. On the Valiant's bridge, General Thomas Briggs stood with arms crossed, his gaze locked onto the sensor displays. The Vulkar were advancing in a tight wedge formation, their forward battleships acting as a spearhead, designed to rip through any human defenses with overwhelming firepower. But the humans weren't meeting them with energy shields or countermeasures. They were waiting, letting the enemy close in. "Hold position," Briggs ordered. Captain Travis Cole, seated at the weapons console, kept his hands steady. "They're almost in range." Down in the firing chamber, Colonel Mark Jensen stood alongside a team of engineers, their eyes fixed on the enormous barrel of the Mac cannon. The weapon's capacitors hummed with potential energy. Magnetic rails primed to launch a solid tungsten slug the size of a truck at near-relativistic speeds. Jensen's earpiece crackled. "We only get one shot at this," Briggs said. Jensen nodded to himself. One shot. One chance to prove that the Velker weren't invincible, that their so-called superior technology was nothing more than a fragile illusion. Above them, the Velker fleet pushed deeper into range. Their sensors scanned for threats, searching for heat signatures, plasma buildups, anything that resembled the warfare they understood. But the Mac cannon gave them nothing. No thermal spikes, no energy distortions, just an inert slug, waiting to be propelled at a speed that no shielding system in the galaxy had ever been designed to counter. On the Velker flagship Vizuri, Admiral Kelroth Cern watched his fleets advance with casual disinterest. He had expected resistance. Humanity had always been stubborn, but their silence puzzled him. "Are their defenses operational?" he asked, his voice sharp. A Velker officer bowed slightly. "Scans show no active weapon signatures, Admiral. No plasma buildup, no railgun activity. Their primary vessels are either retreating or holding position." Kelroth exhaled in disappointment. "Pathetic." His gaze flicked across the vast holographic projection of the battlefield. If the humans refused to fight, then this war would end before it had truly begun. He turned back toward the viewport, watching the largest of the human vessels, the one labeled U.S. Valiant, drift silently in the distance. Then, without warning, something flashed from its hull. Kelroth barely had time to blink before the impact came. The slug struck the Velker battleship Threxion, a 400-meter behemoth at the spearhead of the formation. The projectile tore through the ship's shields like they didn't even exist, smashing into the hull at 25,000 meters per second. The impact was catastrophic. A violent shock wave rippled through the Threxion structure, its reinforced armor crumpling inward as if it were made of paper. The kinetic energy transfer sent molten metal spraying into space, and in the next instant, the ship detonated from within, a chain reaction of rupture compartments and uncontrolled decompression. The Threxion didn't just take damage. It ceased to exist. On the Vizuri's bridge, chaos erupted. Officers scrambled to understand what had happened, their displays struggling to process the sheer force of the attack. Kelroth stepped forward, his mind racing. What was that? Unknown, Admiral. An officer barked, panic in his voice. No energy signature detected. It was a solid projectile. Kelroth's blood ran cold. Projectiles. That was impossible. No species had used such primitive weapons in centuries. Their shields were calibrated against energy-based attacks, not simple mass accelerated to unimaginable speeds. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. A single shot had just obliterated one of their finest warships. On the U.S. Valiant, the bridge crew watched in silence as the Threxion's wreckage tumbled through space, its remains glowing with residual heat. The Velker formation had halted, their advance shattered by one pull of a trigger. Jensen's voice crackled over the comms. "Confirmed kill." Briggs exhaled slowly. "Load the next round." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. The Mac cannon's magnetic rails hummed again, charging for another shot. The Velker fleet, once an unstoppable force, was now hesitating, their commanders scrambling to understand a threat they had never prepared for. On the Vizuri, Kelroth turned sharply. Asterisk asterisk evasive maneuvers. Adjust shield harmonics. Asterisk asterisk. But it was too late. The Valiant fired again. This time, the slug ripped through two ships in a single shot, punching through the first like it wasn't there, then smashing into the second with an impact that sent it spiraling out of control. Fires and explosions consumed both vessels, their crews powerless against an attack that simply ignored every defensive system they had ever built. Kelroth's hands tightened into fists. He had underestimated humanity. Everyone had. The Vulkar had thought war was about technology, about refinement, about mastering the elegance of energy-based combat. But the humans had gone back to basics. And now, the Vulkar were paying the price. Briggs stared at the wreckage before him. The Vulkar fleet had stopped moving entirely. Fear had taken hold. He leaned forward, issuing a single command. Asterisk asterisk fire at will. Asterisk asterisk. The Vulkar armada was in full retreat. Across the battlefield, wreckage floated in the void. Twisted hulls of once mighty warships that had ruled the stars unchallenged. Now, they were nothing more than silent tombs, shattered by a force so simple that their scientists refused to believe it was possible. On the U.S. Valiant, General Thomas Briggs stood at the center of the bridge, watching as the remnants of the Vulkar fleet scrambled to flee. Their once tight formations had collapsed into chaotic, desperate maneuvers, their commanders issuing garbled distress signals that no longer held authority. The fear was palpable. Briggs turned to Captain Travis Cole. Status. Cole checked the sensor readout. We're tracking 4 confirmed kills, 2 more dead in the water. Their command ship is running, but they're too dumbfounded to fight back. A smirk tugged at Briggs's lips. The first battle in history fought with kinetic rounds against energy-based defenses had lasted less than an hour, and humanity had annihilated them. Down in the firing chamber, Colonel Mark Jensen wiped sweat from his brow. The Mac cannon's rails were still glowing hot, its magnetic coils humming as the final round settled into place. His engineers worked frantically to cool the systems between shots, but it didn't matter. The damage had already been done. We've got the next slug ready, Jensen reported. Briggs considered it. The battle was over. The Vulkar weren't just retreating. They were running blind with terror, scrambling for hyperspace exits like prey fleeing from an unseen predator. Dr. Ethan Hayes, monitoring from the science station, exhaled slowly. We didn't just win, he murmured. We just rewrote the laws of war. Briggs nodded. And they know it. A transmission flickered to life. Admiral Kelroth Cern, his once imposing figure, now stripped of arrogance, appeared on the holoscreen. The bridge was silent as the Vulkar commander's eyes flickered between Briggs and the battlefield behind him. Ruined warships, burning debris, the bodies of his own men drifting into the abyss. Briggs took a step forward. I assume you're calling to surrender. Kelroth's mandibles twitched. Just hours ago, he had seen humanity as nothing more than an inconvenience, a stubborn species clinging to outdated weapons, laughable tactics. But now, he looked like a man who had seen death itself. His voice was tight with controlled fury. What are you? Briggs folded his arms. Humans. He let the word hang. The same species you mocked. The same species you thought were beneath you. He nodded toward the wreckage behind Kelroth. And the same species that just wiped your best warships off the map with a couple of solid hunks of metal. Kelroth's jaw clenched, but he couldn't argue. Briggs continued, his tone steady. You spent centuries refining energy warfare. You perfected shields, plasma weapons, quantum defenses. All of it built to counter a very specific kind of threat. But you never stopped to ask the most important question. He leaned forward. Asterisk asterisk, what happens when someone fights differently? Asterisk asterisk. Kelroth remained silent. Briggs gestured to Cole, who brought up a simulation display. See this. The screen showed a projection of every Velker warship in their fleet. We ran the numbers. If we scale this up, one human battleship can kill 5 of yours before you can even react. The display zoomed out, showing humanity's entire fleet. And we have a lot more than one ship. Kelrotha's breathing was controlled, but his hands were clenched so tightly that his knuckles had darkened. Briggs stared him down. You came here thinking you were gods. His voice was cold. You leave knowing your prey. Kelrotha's expression darkened. His pride demanded defiance, but reality offered no escape. He had lost. The Velker had lost. Finally, he exhaled sharply. This isn't over, human. Briggs gave a slow nod. No, Admiral. This is just the beginning. The transmission cut. On the view screen, the remaining Velker warships blinked into hyperspace, abandoning the battlefield. The silence that followed was almost surreal. Cole let out a low whistle. Well, that was satisfying. Jensen's voice crackled over the comms. Think they'll be back. Briggs exhaled, glancing at the wreckage one last time. Maybe. But next time, they won't be laughing. Dr. Hayes folded his arms, staring at the Mac cannon schematics still flickering on his monitor. We just changed everything, he murmured. This war is never going to be the same. Briggs turned, his gaze settling on the vast emptiness of space beyond. The Velker had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had learned a truth that would haunt them forever. Mass times acceleration doesn't care about your shields.